Hi everybody and welcome to Dublin Tech Talks podcast in association with WorkHuman. It's Gavin Fox here. On this episode we are speaking to Michelle Concannon, who is Global SVP of Engineering for Signify Health, which is opening a new operation in Galway, hiring about 120 to 200 people. Really interesting story of Michelle's career from big tech in Galway over to San Fran, back to Ireland and fundamentally back down to Galway with Signify Health. Great discussion about their journey and what Signify Health do and what they're trying to do technology-wise. Hope you enjoy. Okay, we'll start. Michelle Concannon, Senior Global SVP of Engineering for Signify Health. Welcome to Dublin Tech Talks.
Thanks, Gav. It's great to be here.
Do you want to tell us a bit about Signify Health, what they're doing, and why Ireland? We'll ask that question in a while, but what's the reason you're in the business?
So I guess you've introduced me as SVP of Global SVP of Technology for Signify Health, but I like to describe myself really as a purpose-driven, shall we say, global technology leader who has passion for creating, I guess, diverse and inclusive culture. So for me, why am I at Signify Health? Signify Health, fundamentally, their purpose is to create trusted relationships to make people healthier, and that's, I guess, a purpose which resonated to me at this stage of my career. I've spent many years in different fantastic technology companies, to be fair, doing very interesting, complex things. But I think you get to that point where you're looking for that thing that is slightly higher purpose than maybe what you've done before, and that's the reason I'm at Signify. What do they do? So they're primarily they're US tech-enabled health services company, and effectively, they have a massive network of clinicians, nurse practitioners and doctors who kind of augment, I guess, the traditional care paths in the US. We do in-home health assessments, go in and do a whole health checkup on individuals in their home, try to catch conditions ahead of them actually causing issues using our kind of proprietary data and analytics platforms. And we also provide a bunch of tooling, I guess, to those providers in various different facilities to allow them to provide that care at lower cost with better quality healthcare outcomes.
It was really interesting. I had heard of the business when the launch and that kind of stuff, but kind of doing a bit of research for this, it's a very interesting business. And kind of even the age group, it's 65 plus type age group, and that it's you forget, I think, more than anything that there's business. This type of business is massive, and even trying to preempt somebody being sick can save a lot of money.
But the home is a sanctuary, right, for a lot of people, and if you can access healthcare where you feel safe and 100%. Comfortable, I mean, that's worth a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about meeting the patients and meeting the members where they're at. I mean, if you think of your parents, grandparents in that age category, they don't want to be going into a healthcare facility. So anything that we can do to bring it to them, avoid the trauma, but not just that. It's also when we get there, if they do need to actually enter the facility, using the technology to make the referrals, but doing it when it's needed and trying to facilitate it.
And who is the customer? I know you've got various different customers, but does it flow from the clinicians into the home or backwards? It's
a great question. So US healthcare system, obviously, it's quite complex, but because a lot of the population that we're serving are Medicare members, so CMS is the federal US government's kind of Medicare, or the over 65s healthcare program, they would be one of our big customers, or one of the big payers, for want of a better word. We also work with some of the commercial payers in the US to perform these health assessments, which ultimately is all around risk capture and trying to determine the health of that population. So they're another large customer. And then there's the actual healthcare providers themselves, because the reality is, because of the complexity in the US, technologically speaking, these systems are all very disparate. They don't actually have the tools that they need to be able to determine which is the best specialist for me to refer this member to. How am I doing in terms of cost and quality outcomes and closing that feedback loop? So the providers are equally customers indirectly, as they exist inside of these accountable care organizations, which is a lot of acronyms. But really the big push in the US is to move toward value-based care. And that's the whole concept of that, is incentivizing all of the facilities and providers around the actual healthcare outcome versus just the sheer number of kind of visits, which is more of a fee-for-service type model. So our technology is helping the transformation toward value-based care by partnering with the payers, the providers, and obviously CMS is one of the big payers, and the members of the people who obviously benefit ultimately indirectly.
And then early detection and the offset of costs for treatment later, all that stuff is, makes it commercial sense as well.
Yeah, commercially, basically, we don't get paid. So Signify Health don't get paid on those value-based care construct unless the providers and the members are ultimately doing better. So they're reducing the cost of the care. They need to reduce it to a level where they're getting these shared savings, which are the big programs that the US government roll out. And then we take some of that as well.
So, yeah, loads.
I could keep going, but I'll stop right there. Yeah.
Just your personal journey. I was quite interested. You've come from big tech, like through and over to San Fran, back to Ireland, and to where you are now. How's that journey been?
It's been quite the journey. It's been fascinating. It's been humbling, I guess, really, when I look back to where I started, which was honestly not knowing the first thing about computer science and throwing everything up in a heap when it came to CAO forms and picking this thing out.
I lasted 6 weeks in computer applications doing that.
Yeah, that's literally. I mean, I was going to do physio, music, everything except what I ended up doing, but I loved it. So I was fortunate enough that I kind of hit the jackpot in terms of just landing someplace that I actually enjoyed. But so I spent the first 13 years of my career in Galway through contact centre, a lot of large telcos, the Nortel at the time, some consulting companies, spent a lot of time in Germany, really on kind of custom implementation type things with different large, like Deutsche Telekom, T-Mobile, a lot of these big German accounts, where I learned a lot about sitting in front of customers, which was interesting. Went to Nortel, got into the contact centre side, a lot of kind of back-end engineering there. And when Cisco set up in Galway, helped with the leadership team there, which was another fantastic journey, taking something from zero to where it is today. And relocated with them in 2013 to San Francisco, as you said. That was a fascinating journey, both personally, but like from a pure technology perspective.
That was when tech was, like Silicon Valley was becoming Silicon Valley in 13.
Yeah, and it really was like formative for me, I guess, in terms of just the personal journey, but being able to get right into the middle of cloud was kind of new, DevOps was kind of new, mobile first was kind of new, and certainly even from where Cisco had been playing out its stall up to that point, being able to get in at the beginning of that was fantastic. And the team I worked with there, they were an acquisition that Cisco made as well, so they, I guess, had been through this a little bit earlier on, and the support that we got was fantastic. That was three great years out there.
Was there any kind of cultural learnings around how decisions were made or problems were solved, in an engineering environment? Like, obviously new technologies are, it's great to get exposure to that, but was there a cultural evolution for you as well that you've stuck with you? Or
there was, and actually probably that's where this began, and we're actually looking at bringing some of that now and some of those techniques in. I said, but we talk about collaboration. Collaboration it's a word that we use a lot, but like I really got to see that working well in a technology team at that point in my career, because we moved to, not to get too into the weeds in terms of the technical context, but this whole idea of feature teams, like we talk about agile and how do you deliver software. And lots of the time we've got these kind of siloed teams. There's the data team, the applications team. We really employed this kind of, okay, what is the thing that we're trying to release end to end, and stood up kind of feature teams around that. And from a pure collaboration perspective, that was that worked really, really well. And I got to see that first cross-functionally, so that we all got out of our little silos of whether it's apps or data or product or engineering. So I think really operating as, whether you call it one Signify, which is what I would refer to now, but that whole, how does everyone come together around the actual business goal or the objective versus getting wrapped around the axle on the thing you want to build or however you think it should look like. It's the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, fundamentally.
For sure.
And was there a big difference coming from Galway, going San Fran? Like, it's the same company fundamentally, but was it being done differently in two places?
You're right. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, same company. Culturally speaking, at that time, this was actually more feasible because of the fact that we were moving into this more cloud-oriented DevOps model where you could create that end-to-end autonomy from a pure technological construct. And I guess I had the opportunity to get that a little bit earlier than maybe where we're getting to now in the last few years here. But being exposed to that and that kind of technological underpinnings and the culture of just like, okay, we're doing a launch. It wasn't about the kind of structured backlog of like, here's all the things, a traditional product roadmap. It was like, here's the beta. We're going to look at the data. We're going to get something to market. We're all going to rally around this thing, get it out there. and then build upon it. I mean, these are all things which now seem very normal and very standard. But like 10 years ago, we were a little bit more structured here in terms of, you've got all of these gates, you've got your first customer ship. Thou shalt not put something out there until you have every I dotted and every T crossed, versus this more incremental kind of agile, like the true meaning of what I would perceive to be kind of agile.
Yeah, I remember when we were working and suddenly project managers were calling themselves product managers and stuff like that.
Right.
And it was
analysts for product.
and it was just randomly like
Correct.
they changed their CV, and you're like,
we're not working any differently.
yeah. But it was just.
Well, you're right. It's that focus on like, what is it that we're measuring? Is it the number of users? Like, what's the funnel? When do they fall off in this kind of customer journey? It was really everyone looking at those metrics and living and breathing it, versus, again, sitting in that one silo of I need to get this microservice done or whatever it is.
I just
understanding the why.
Yeah, I just remember that like about 6 months, it suddenly was this change in like how people talked about what they did, and it was all been fed in clearly internally, and it was just suddenly how you did your job was changed pretty
that
quickly.
misalignment in terms of the engineering is agile, but is the business agile?
Correct. And actually that was one of the biggest learnings and something to overcome. Like in a company as big as Cisco, very future forward thinking, but it was, you're not just talking about the technology team, you're talking about all of the functions around that in terms of what with historically support teams, the historical operations function, how do all of them come on this journey towards a cloud first, DevOps first kind of a mindset. And as I've gone through Microsoft and even now Signify, more and more of my role from a technology perspective has been in working directly with the business and trying to abstract away, as I say, hide the seams of the technology that's going on, so that the teams that I'm building understand the why and understand it's that empathy and kind of stepping into the why of what you're doing versus getting too wrapped around. Obviously, you've got to deliver good, high quality software while you're doing that. And
you mentioned that mission and purpose component, very important to me, with myself, my working with colleagues. That's our main reason why a lot of us are there. Do you think people who are attracted to a mission-driven business are more inclined to approach these problems in that way? Are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think, through all of the interviewing that we've been doing, even over the last 6 months, it's incredible to see how that purpose is kind of resonating, and most of the people that are coming talking to us are coming for that reason. And it definitely spills over into everything that we're doing, because people have that eagerness, the passion, the hunger to go and figure out like the why, partner with the product folks and really double down on like what is the metric, and going above and beyond and finding new ways, actually finding new opportunities to actually go and expand from whatever that original idea or product concept was.
I've seen purpose been a lot more driving factors why people will change jobs.
100%, yeah.
Like, you can get a job, I'm going to say quite flippant, I know there's been a lot of layoff, pretty easy if you're in technology in Ireland. You can, like that's what it is. But where you work has just been, last 2 years, it's post-COVID, whichever, during COVID, really important to people. And what that vision and purpose is, if you don't know what it is in the business and you're going to interview, like that's very difficult to buy into. And if you have a chance to make people's lives better, work, make employees, your recognition, any of that kind of stuff, that's something really nice to work towards. So I think companies have to work better at that.
I think there's categories, right? Because in your business, it's quite obvious to see the why and the impact to people. But I think whatever it is you do, I mean, it might not tie back to some, social purpose or a higher purpose, but you still need to know why. Yeah. And that needs to be really clear in the conversations you have with people.
It does, and I think to your point, you're right. Like, it's easy to see the correlation when you work in something like healthcare, but I think investing the time in creating a culture where people are they're caring about their colleagues. Like, there's a huge push around community, and in bringing us or technology into the community and looking at driving some more purpose there. Whether it's mentorship with local universities, whether it's literally partnerships with other local organizations. There are lots of different ways to drive purpose, but the intentionality around that is really important. And one of the things that we do a lot of is mission moments. It's a Signify construct, I guess, but starting all of our all hands with like, okay, here's a mission moment where somebody went into a home, to keep impressing that, so people can tie their work back to the greater.
Yeah, because we said that earlier, there's a lot of people that work in dev centres here and get shipped back to the States and they never see their work ever again. They start something again for 2 years.
Yeah, people really want that. Like when we talk about employee engagement and intrinsic motivations, and like I've seen this in all the years, like yes, it's obvious in healthcare. But the thing I've heard time after time with my teams are, I want to know that I'm working on something impactful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what people perceive to be impactful is different for everyone. But at the end of the day, they want to see what they're doing being used to better something or somebody's life.
Get to nowadays, Signify Health. Is it a tech business with a health function or a health business with a tech function?
I would say a health business with a tech function. I mean, it's called a tech-enabled health services company. And in times like right now, that's actually a really good thing, right? But well, one of the things that I've learned quickly actually when I moved into healthcare here, I worked at Optum for a few years as well after coming back from the US. You go in as a technologist with the real, why can't we just do this and go and build this app, or like, why can't we be like consumers? And that a healthy dose of that is really good. But the difference with working in healthcare, which is technology enabled, to succeed in healthcare, really, you need all of that, clinical SME knowledge, and the foundation is in the healthcare. You bring the technology to support the different services. It's not as connected as you might like it to be. Therefore, all of these things that you might have historically seen or used or think should be just logically like, here's my app to go engage with my doctor. Yes, you can do that, but there's all of the other surrounding kind of services that aren't that necessarily intuitive. So certainly a lot of our business is, we have a lot of operational teams. We have a proprietary logistics platform because we recruit all the clinicians into our network. We have to go and do all of the scheduling to send those clinicians out into the member's home. What's the best traveling salesman problem? How do you optimize all of that? And we have a lot of what we call member engagement coordinators who will literally be ringing up members to make those appointments. So again, there's a big operational kind of function there. We have 10,000 clinicians, so we have all of the the clinical expertise as well, and the tech is really to support them in going in. Like, it's a human sport. It's really important to have that human connection in healthcare.
Is there disruption there on the clinician side? Is that would they always have been engaged in that kind of gig kind of work, but just not through a platform, or are we pulling people out from more traditional?
It's actually really interesting. For me, coming into this business, you hear about the gig economy, and it's kind of weird to hear that construct in healthcare because it's anything but. They actually really like working in this fashion in terms of being able to come in and say, here's the hours that I want to be available to go and conduct these health assessments on Signify Health's behalf. Many of them also do work in other facilities as well, but lots of them don't. So it's an interesting dynamic.
It's quite empowering, right? Versus a traditional approach.
Well, we've all heard about clinician burnout, and this is a lot of what we focus on as well. Like the technology we're building, aside from those, you choose your own hours. For the folks that don't, the provider-enabled platforms that we're giving them is all about trying to, pre-populate information, give you as much as you can, kind of guide you what's the next best action when you get into all of the analytics and whatnot based on conditions and different things. So clinician burnout is one of the big issues, and just understaffing, which is where someone like Signify Health comes in, because we kind of augment them. In some cases, we talk about the we do and the you do model. So in some cases, we will give them the technology to perform these services themselves directly at the point of care. In other cases, they will have us go in and do some of that on their behalf in the home.
That's interesting.
So growth, Galway. New business, you're 7 months in?
Yeah.
What's the plan for the Galway site?
So it's very exciting. Yeah, we're 7 months in. I hit my 6-month milestone last week. I got a cake, which is fantastic.
You passed probation?
We talk about culture. I think so. If anyone's listening, hopefully I did. Yeah, we have our Josh Builder, my CCO, and some of the executive leadership team coming again next week, but we've had them out a few times. So we're at just over the 30 people mark right now. It's been a fantastic hiring kind of trajectory. Looking to get to 125 by 2024, I think. So we'll get there through 2023. We've had fantastic talent coming through the pipeline right now. We feel very blessed. Obviously, we're setting up in the west of Ireland. We're adopting kind of a hybrid scenario, but we are leaning toward, insofar as we can, like people that can commute within that time, because, we've all had this conversation around the whole going back to the office, and, you cannot overlook the fact that even in this early phase of growth, like we're trying to create a very strong culture.
Yeah.
The best way to do that is to bring people physically together, because we don't have that that well, as we talk about, of pre-existing kind of relationships built. So we do have flex built in, but we're trying to get into the office like 2 to 3 days a week. And we know we do have some folks on remote.
It's quite the norm at the moment, 2-3 days, the request. And I understand it. Like it's my business, I think, a lot, it depends on what you're doing. But again, 2-3 days
it's just become a very personal decision for people. But I agree. I think companies, if they haven't, need to land on what's important to them from a culture perspective. And, that is equally as important as what people want. And, if you got a good marriage there, things will work out well. Or, if that's not what you want to do.
I mean, the world is definitely changing and it's never really going back. And so, it's really important to give people the flexibility. But, I was at an interesting conversation at an ITAG event in Galway last week with all of the local leaders there, and this got kind of heated and kind of interesting in terms of like different points of view. But I think, like anything, and at Microsoft we spent quite a lot of time on this. They did a lot of research in terms of like actually monitoring people's activity, and will continue to do so. The reality is this is one that we need to be agile on and iterate. But right now, at least in our growth phase, we know that like we're having our anchor days. People are coming in even while we're waiting for our new office to get built out, and they've proven to be really effective thus far.
Yeah. I knew fully remote was dead when you hear companies like Microsoft releasing survey results that actually you need to be in the office to be successful. You see all the big tech starting to release these things because they want people back in the office. Because
there definitely seems to be a bit of a shift now again as the dust settles a little bit, I think. And
there's only a few companies, I think, I know, was it Dropbox were fully remote? They sold all their offices and have a couple of floating ones, and there isn't that many that actually committed fully to it.
Yeah.
No, it's variations, right?
I mean,
horses
for courses as well, right? It's an interesting human experiment, but I think you cannot beat connection. I mean, I just believe that fundamentally. I think I do believe that you can create and drive cultures in a remote environment. I've been a global leader for many years now. So like I have led teams for many years where I have not been able to be physically present. So it's not that, like, I think that's a really core part of my role as a leader as well, having a geographically dispersed team. At the same time, the more human connection that you can create, that's going to drive the collaboration, the in-person, and it makes the harder conversations remotely later on so much easier.
Yeah, I think the important thing is whatever the model is, and if it's a blended model, that you have a responsibility to the people in each of those channels to make sure they have a good experience.
100% correct. Like the hybrid is harder in many times, right? Being inclusive in a hybrid environment is really challenging no matter what kind of technology that you're using, because there is that in the room, out of the room dynamic.
I like hubs. I think companies that can develop multiple talent hubs around the country and then once a quarter maybe come together, something like that. Gives you, like, it's still difficult to find people. So, if you're finding engineers in a certain place, you're going to hire them there, and if you can get them into
100%. I mean, the war for talent is real, right? And you can't ignore that either. So it's a balance.
Yeah, no, there's no
right answer here.
But back to Galway, I know it's Dublin Tech Talks, but Galway's a super little
it is.
tech hub. Like Rent the Runway there, Fidelity have been there years. Like there's some really big powerhouses there. That must have been a good selling point for.
Yeah, I was saying before we started that my journey back to Galway is kind of interesting because I hadn't necessarily planned it, to be fair. I had set down roots in Dublin, which is kind of
in a room somewhere.
I always knew that I would ultimately go back to Galway, but I moved for many reasons. This is a fantastic opportunity for me in terms of my personal growth, but and the purpose and everything that we spoke about already. But Galway as a community, to be fair, I'm only back there 6 months, and I was just saying last week to my colleague Elaine Murphy, our site leader, in 1 week, I was at the university on Tuesday morning with the president who held like a leadership forum to see what that group wanted out of the students. The next day we had like an ITAG community event where all of, again, similar set of folks, but we were talking about future of work. Galway Chamber hosted something on Friday night. We had the idea that the community in Galway is really something that is second to none. And possibly I hadn't been here in Dublin as long, but in the 6 years that I was here, I went right back. I haven't experienced that, and I think it's something to do with it being smaller as well. But there are some really, really strong technology companies there. Our neighbours, Genesis, in the same building as Bonham Quay, Diligence, Cisco.
But that just creates,
exactly.
Like Grand Canal suddenly created this environment of excellence within technology.
Yeah, I think, in larger metropolitan centres, what you find are just micro communities in that, in that location. So I think but your point is really valid, and people are seeking out those communities. I mean, we talked to some people earlier, and within that entrepreneur space, there's a very strong community spirit as well. So
100%. Like the meetups and like a lot of the startups in Galway that have gone on to do great things. And like we had empathy jams last week, the Porter Shed environment down there. There's lots of shared spaces, which is what we're using right now while we're waiting for our new fancy new building. But
is your dad doing that one now?
No, he needs to focus on my house.
But the community thing was why we started Tech Talks. It was, we wanted to go out and learn more about what other people were doing. Like it was selfish at the time, business-wise, but now it's still very much,
it's curious.
I'm a nosy type person.
Not selfish, you're curious.
Yeah, it's a platform. It's just because I think what we found in the early days, it was like the very, very early stage companies just had no voice. Yeah. And it was just a chance to, share what people were doing. So.
And people loved pizza.
Yeah, that's true.
People love pizza.
Yeah. But no, I was talking to the CEO of the Porter Sheds down there, Mary Rogers, and she's organising like a Christmas party in a few weeks for all of those smaller companies who they don't have all of those kind of they're scaling or whatever. But it's just really lovely to see. It's kind of makes you all warm and fuzzy on the inside. It sounds corny, but it's very, very true.
It's very it's very difficult for small, especially like my business focuses on 0 to 100 seats type people, and they find it ridiculously hard to get talent because they're drowned out by bigger spends, like in essence on marketing, and they're very difficult to get a voice in that space.
I think coming back to the whole purpose is one thing, purpose for the actual organisation that you're going into, but the other thing that is really, really important is the connection to community. You create a sense of belonging, and that is within an organisation, but it's also how that organisation is partnering and anchoring itself in the community.
Absolutely.
So, won't take much more of your time, promise.
All good.
Your journey has been really interesting. What kind of advice would you give female technologists in looking at the journey and where they're going and how they're doing it? What kind of advice would you give somebody maybe 5-10 years into their career, looking maybe next steps or leadership along those lines?
It's a big question, isn't it? Well, I'll go with what one mentor did for me before. I think the advice I would give my younger self is, like, you can hear advice, but I think the reality is until you get to a certain point as well, you're less fearless, I think is the term, and anything that you can do to take more risks sooner is probably the best advice that I would give, and just get out of your own head basically in terms of all the conversations you have with yourself about why you shouldn't do this or why you're not good enough. Like, really, those are universal. I know there's a lot of talk on gender, but I think at the end of the day, fear stops people from doing things that they don't realise that they can do. So that's kind of advice, but it's really try and take more risks. The other thing I would say is the point of my career that was pivotal before I moved to the US and mentor/sponsor type at Cisco took me aside and asked me to sit down and go, hey, Michelle, what do you really want to do with your career? Because we just coast. I mean, the first few years of your career, especially into technology, you got to go deep, you got to learn your skill, you got to get good at the programming. And once you've got that mastered and you're starting to figure the rest out, it's okay, what do you like doing? And really stepping back and trying to understand that. It's so much about self-awareness as much as it is anything else. What are the things that you do every day that you enjoy? What are the things that you don't like so much? And then trying to turn that into a path for yourself.
Do you have a mentor still, or a personal board, all that stuff? I love all that.
I mean, I probably don't have as much as I should. I do. I have the same kind of go-to folks that I've worked with. I go to for all of my advice and my how-tos. I think that's really, really important. And it's nearly more important even that they're in industries and companies that you're not. I mean, that's just my personal experience, because the objectivity is there, and it's interesting how much you find the commonality outside of the world that you're in.
Sorry to cut across. Did you go find them purposely, the people that you went with, or did they just come naturally into your web?
Bit of both. This individual that I'm talking about kind of came naturally into my web, which is where I start getting to the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, I suppose. Mentors are probably people that I would have worked with in the past, but have probably not for many years haven't. And kind of would have gone to them. But very organically for me, it wasn't a very structured, because there have been structured programs in all the organizations that I've worked in, you know, go find your mentor. For me, I've done it more, okay, here's somebody I respect and admire and I'm very comfortable leaning into. And then there's the folks that come to you, and you, in the beginning, you're kind of like, wow, who am I to be getting this advice? But actually, it's very powerful as well, and something, you know, that you kind of look on retrospectively and figure out, okay, how do I now trying to start giving back and doing mentorship and getting involved with the universities and just, you know, networking programs and whatnot in our own organizations.
Michelle Concannon, Global SVP of Engineering for Signify Health. Thank you very much for your time and for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
Great to talk to you.
Lovely
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
David here. Thanks again, folks, for joining us. There you have it. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to whatever platform you're engaging with the content on. You can also find us on LinkedIn. Also check out our meetup page, because we are getting back to in-person events. So we look forward to seeing you in person at one of them, or certainly bringing more content and telling some more stories from the tech scene in Dublin. Thank you.